The bronze fragment clicked softly against the felt cradle as the lake water struck the dock pilings below us. Once. Twice. Again. "You are absolutely certain?" Everlee asked. Her cream cardigan was pulled tight around her shoulders, though the late summer night was warm. Both hands circled a coffee mug she had forgotten to drink from. The dock lights caught the pale line of an old scar on her left wrist and the fresh crescent her thumbnail had pressed into her index finger. I lowered the jeweler's loop and directed my spectral penlight across the fragment's recessed markings. "The corrosion reaches beneath the engraving," I said. "A modern copy can imitate color. It cannot reproduce crystal growth through the metal in that pattern. So it is real." "Yes." The water kept counting beneath us. Everlee looked toward the dark outline of the lakeside estate. "Then Richard will not stop." Her father's former business partner had frozen the trust payments 2 days earlier. He claimed the estate's central antiquities collection was fraudulent and had invoked a loan clause that would transfer the house, grounds, and remaining collection to his company if the centerpiece failed authentication. Everlee had 3 problems with no easy exit. The estate secured the loan. Selling individual pieces before the dispute ended would violate the trust. Fighting Richard without admissible expert evidence would drain the last unrestricted account she had left. My accreditation allowed my findings to enter court without another preliminary review. And the hearing deadline left no time to find a second specialist willing to accept a contested collection. That was why she had driven to my office in the city. That was why I had followed her back to the lake. I covered the fragment with a microfiber cloth. "This confirms age and manufacture," I said. "It does not prove legal ownership. Authentication and provenance are separate reports." Everlee studied my face as though searching for a hidden fee. "What happens next?" I examined the acquisition records, shipping documents, and export history. "Your counsel uses those findings to challenge the default notice. Mara Levine is filing for a temporary stay tomorrow morning." "Good. You sound disappointed that I already hired a lawyer." "I sound relieved that you hired the right one." The edge of her mouth moved. Everlee smiled whenever I spoke about old things, as if they were living witnesses. I had noticed it in my office when I translated a dedication scratched into a Roman mirror. I noticed it again now. Then the smile disappeared. "Why did my father spend his last 3 years buying pieces every serious curator warned him against?" she asked. "He sold stable investments and acquired objects with incomplete records. Richard says illness made him reckless." The question had followed me through 2 days of ledgers. The purchases were not random. Their shipment codes repeated in a pattern no catalog note explained. "I do not know yet." She looked back at the estate. "That may be the first time I have heard you say that. It will not be the last." A breeze moved across the lake. She shivered once. I reached for the spare canvas wrap in my equipment case, then stopped. "May I?" Everlee glanced at the wrap, then nodded. I placed it around her shoulders without touching her neck. The water continued its steady rhythm below us, no longer a clock for the artifact alone. Richard's deadline sat inside every sound. 3 days later, my colleague Dr. Lena Patel arrived at the estate carrying 2 archival cases and 1 disapproving expression. Lena ran conservation at our firm and had known me long enough to recognize trouble before I named it. She looked through the solarium windows toward Everlee, who was on the terrace speaking with Mara Levin. "You are living here?" Lena asked. "Guest wing, separate entrance. You are also reviewing a collection owned by a client under financial pressure. The engagement letter is clear. And are your feelings equally well documented?" I adjusted the camera mount above a terracotta seal. "There are no feelings relevant to the report." Lena set down the cases. "That sentence should concern you." She reviewed the chain of custody log, verified my sample controls, and signed as second conservator. Then she pointed to a series of shipment tags laid beside the ledgers. The same code appeared on 7 disputed acquisitions, N-17-C. "What does it mean?" she asked. "It is not a carrier format." "Storage?" "Possibly." Everlee entered with Mara behind her. Mara was 44, sharp-eyed, and carried legal folders as if they had personally offended her. The judge granted a 72-hour temporary stay. She said, Richard cannot transfer or encumber estate assets before Friday. After that, I need enough evidence for a preliminary injunction. Everlee set 2 coffees on the work table. Mine was black. Hers carried enough cream to turn the surface pale. You usually drink it black. I said, black is for legal correspondence. Cream is for pretending the world is not ending. Lena took the untouched 3rd cup. And what does mine mean? That I did not know how you take it. Honesty. Promising. Everlee smiled. The smile pulled at something under my ribs. I turned back to the shipment tax. Mara noticed. Lawyers notice the facts people try hardest not to submit. The authentication report needs to stay independent, she said. No public statements, private negotiations, or promises to the client without ethics review. I understand. Everlee's fingers tightened around her cup. Mara faced her. That protects you too. If Richard claims Callum acted out of personal loyalty, we answer with procedure. Everlee nodded. Then we follow procedure. The answer should have relieved me. Instead, I felt the exact shape of the wall between us. For the next 10 days, the estate became a laboratory. I photographed tool marks, compared alloy signatures, and built a matrix separating scientific authenticity from legal provenance. Lena tested conservation conditions. Mara requested invoices from 3 European archives and subpoenaed Richard's company for sales records tied to the loan. Everlee worked beside us, translating her father's private shorthand and locating boxes no inventory mentioned. The house was too large for 4 people. Empty rooms amplified footsteps. Dust settled on furniture draped in white sheets. The grounds crew had stopped coming after Richard withheld trust payments. Each evening, Everlee moved through the halls, turning off lights one by one. She never asked anyone to stay. That made me stay later. A thunderstorm broke over the lake on the 11th night. Rain struck the solarium roof hard enough to drown conversation. The lights flickered twice, then vanished. I secured a painted wooden panel inside its foam mount and followed the sound of a drawer closing in the kitchen. Everlee stood at the island with legal papers spread around her. Gray stormlight filled the room. Her thumb pressed into her finger again. The backup generator failed, she said. Richard filed a new objection. He claims the astrolabe crossed a border in 1945 without an export permit. May I read it? She slid the document across the counter. The cited gap was real, but wartime collections often moved under emergency custodial declarations instead of standard permits. I had seen the same phrasing in an archive outside Thessaloniki. This does not prove illegal export. I said, I can match the language to wartime custody records and attach the comparison to my affidavit. You can do that tonight? I can draft it tonight. Mara decides how to use it. The distinction mattered. Everlee heard it. She leaned against the counter and closed her eyes for 1 second. I found the utility flashlight, reset the breaker, then started the generator manually. The refrigerator hummed back to life. When I returned, she was still standing in the same place. Have you eaten? I had coffee. That was not the question. I have not had time. I opened the refrigerator. Eggs, spinach, half a loaf of bread. Sit for 10 minutes. I said, eat half. Then decide whether you want me to continue. Everlee looked toward the stool, then at me. You make food sound like a contractual option. It reduces resistance. That is deeply unromantic. I am cooking eggs during a power failure. Your standards are unrealistic. A laugh escaped her before she could stop it. She sat. I cooked while she watched from the opposite side of the island. The counter remained between us. I plated eggs, spinach, and toast, then placed her fork on the side that would not touch the wet papers. Everlee looked at the bread. This may be older than the astrolabe. I have not authenticated it. She laughed again, softer this time. Relief entered the room, in small, ordinary pieces. Warm food, working lights, rain losing force against the windows. Halfway through the meal, she pointed to a passage in the legal objection. You explain old love letters differently from everything else. I kept my eyes on the affidavit notes. How? You stop sounding like a machine. Machines are efficient. They also do not blush when translating poetry. I do not blush. You did when you explained that medieval phrase about carrying someone's heart through winter. The room was overheated. Everlee smiled over the rim of her cup. I returned to the affidavit before she could see how close she had come to the truth. The deposition took place 2 days later in a glass conference room overlooking the city. Richard Vale sat across from Everlee in a tailored gray suit. He had known her since childhood and used that history like a blade wrapped in velvet. Your father was confused at the end. He said, "You know that. Let me spare you the humiliation of proving it in public." Everlee's shoulders went rigid. Mara placed a hand beside her legal pad, not on Everlee, but close enough to signal that she was not alone. Richard turned to me. "Mr. Gonzalez, you are 32, correct?" "Yes." "You manage authentication for a private firm, but you are not an attorney, an archaeologist employed by a government, or a judge." "Correct." "And Ms. Adams hired you after my company questioned the collection?" "Yes." "Then your income depends on giving clients the answer they want." I opened the chain of custody matrix. "My income depends on reports surviving review." Mara slid my sworn declaration across the table. It separated alloy analysis, surface imaging, archive references, and ownership gaps into distinct findings. No grand claims. No blurred categories. Richard's attorney read the first pages, then whispered to him. Richard leaned back. "Experts can be mistaken." "They can," I said. "That is why Dr. Lena Patel independently verified the samples, and why the Hellenic Archive supplied certified custody records." Lena sat behind us as technical observer. She raised one eyebrow at Richard. Mara spoke next. "Your company's challenge states the entire collection is fabricated. Mr. Gonzalez's report establishes that the central objects are ancient. Dr. Patel confirms the testing. If you have contradictory evidence, produce it." Richard's lawyer requested a break. In the hallway, Everlee stood near the windows with her arms crossed. "You dismantled him," she said. "The report did. You built the report. It is still work." She stepped closer. Vanilla, rain, and the cream coffee she had carried from the car. "Thank you," she said. I moved half a step back. "It is my job." The hurt showed around her eyes before she turned away. Lena waited until Everlee re-entered the conference room. "You preserved the boundary," she said. "Yes. You also used it as a weapon." I closed the matrix folder. That was not my intention. Intent is not the same as effect. The deposition ended with Richard withdrawing his claim that the artifacts were modern forgeries. He did not withdraw the default action. Instead, his attorney shifted to ownership history and the missing purchase records. We had one room. The house still stood inside the storm. That evening, Everlee found me cataloging a shelf of minor objects in the library. A worn wooden box sat behind a row of ledgers. Inside lay a broken piece of green sea glass and a yellowed note written in a child's hand. "For Dad to show the way home." A small compass symbol curved beneath the sentence. Everlee stopped beside me. "I gave him that when I was 10, she said. "We found it on a beach in Maine. He kept it on his desk until he knocked it over after he became ill." The glass had split into 3 pieces. "May I examine it?" She opened her palm. I lifted the fragments with padded tweezers. "It has no financial value," she said. "That is not what you asked." I did not ask anything. Her voice broke on the last word. I looked at the compass symbol. The same mark appeared beside several N17C entries in her father's ledger. Not evidence yet. A clue. Did your father use this symbol elsewhere? He marked maps with it, and letters he wanted me to find later. Where are those maps? Some are in the attic. Most were packed before he died. I set the fragments back into the box. "Leave this with me?" Everlee studied my face. "For the records?" "No." She nodded. After midnight, while the lake water tapped against the pilings, I mixed archival resin under a conservation lamp. The fracture lines aligned only when the largest piece turned slightly clockwise. I repaired the glass because words had failed me in the hallway. That part of me did not improve with practice. When I could not say, "Stay," I fixed a hinge. When I could not say, "I am afraid to matter," I repaired what fit beneath a lamp. Before sunrise, I placed the restored glass beside Everlee's cream coffee mug and went down to the dock. The water no longer sounded like a deadline. It marked each breath, while I reviewed the ledger photographs. Everlee's footsteps crossed the planks behind me. She held the green glass to the early light. Fine seams remained visible, but the pieces held. "You fixed it. The resin will remain stable if it stays out of direct heat." She came closer and touched my forearm. Why? The technical answer reached my tongue first. I let it go. "You should not have had to keep every broken piece by yourself." Her fingers tightened once, then released. "The compass mark is in my father's ledger," I added. "It may identify documents he hid intentionally." Everlee looked from the glass to my tablet. "What do we do?" "We follow the mark." That morning gave us direction. At noon, Richard changed the battlefield. A financial site published a redacted copy of Everlee's father's accounts. The article claimed he had purchased forged antiquities to conceal gambling losses, and that Everlee planned a secret sale before creditors could intervene. By 1, 2 prospective museum partners suspended negotiations. By 2, a trustee resigned. The phone rang until Everlee unplugged it. She stood in the library beneath her father's portrait, her face pale. He could not prove the pieces were fake, so he made my father look corrupt. Mara arrived with printed screenshots and a preservation notice. "We do not answer emotionally," she said. "We identify the source, demand corrections, and seek a restraining order if the leak came from sealed trust records." Everlee looked at me. "Will your firm stand behind the authentication?" "Yes, if ethics approves the wording." I called Lena and our compliance director from the library table. We drafted a statement limited to verified facts. The central objects were ancient. The scientific work had been independently reviewed, and no evidence supported the claim of a planned secret sale. The firm approved it in writing. My name went beneath Lena's. Everlee watched me press send. "If buyers walk away anyway." "This follows you," she said. "My statement does not promise market confidence. It states what the evidence proves. You are still doing it." "Yes." "For the job?" The room smelled of old leather and cold coffee. "No," I said, "but the statement remains professional." Her eyes held mine for 1 second longer than safety allowed. Then Mara's phone rang. The leak had come from an exhibit Richard's attorneys filed under seal. Mara requested an emergency hearing. The next 3 days narrowed around documents. The compass symbol appeared on an attic inventory. N17C matched a notation on a steamer trunk shipped from the estate's former coastal warehouse. I did not discover the answer by touching a lucky panel. Everlee and I climbed into the attic with the inventory, a measuring tape, and her father's marked map. The trunk's interior depth was 4 inches shorter than its exterior. Everlee found the release catch beneath a brass corner plate. Inside the false compartment lay shipping invoices, private sale receipts, and copies of wire transfers. The documents did not explain everything in one miraculous confession. They did something better. They created a trail. Richard had sold 7 pieces from the family collection through intermediaries during Everlee's father's illness. The N17C purchases were attempts to recover those same objects from later owners. The green sea glass symbol marked correspondence Everlee's father intended her to find if Richard challenged the estate. At the bottom sat one letter addressed to her. She looked at me before opening it. "Do you want privacy?" "Stay?" I stayed. The letter did not name every crime. Her father admitted he had trusted Richard too long, discovered missing objects too late, and spent his final years buying them back. He asked Everlee not to preserve the house out of guilt. "History belongs where it can be seen," he had written. Do not confuse keeping a building with keeping me. Everlee sat on the attic floor. Dust floated through the beam of my flashlight. He knew I would turn this place into a memorial, she said. I lowered myself beside her, leaving space between our shoulders. What do you want it to become? I do not know. It was the first time I had heard her say that. Mara used the invoices to subpoena bank and auction records. A forensic accountant named Julian Cross traced payments through 2 companies tied to Richard. At the emergency hearing, the judge issued a temporary restraining order, preventing transfer of estate assets and barring Richard from contacting trustees outside counsel. The court scheduled a full preliminary injunction hearing for 3 weeks later. It was protection, not victory. Everlee understood the difference. That night, the water struck the dock in a slower rhythm. She sat beside me, wrapped in her green cardigan, the green glass between us. My father spent years buying back what Richard sold, she said. I spent years assuming the house was the only thing holding our family together. Buildings are persuasive. So are curators. I have never claimed otherwise. She smiled. Every time you talk about love in old letters, you make it sound like a dead language you happen to translate. That is unfair. You explained a 12th century vow for 20 minutes and called it a useful social artifact. It was useful. You smiled when you read it. The phrasing was unusual. There, she pointed at me. You are doing it again. Doing what? Pretending the safest description is the truest one. The water touched the pilings below us. I looked at the green glass rather than her face. When you smiled, I said, I thought you were amused by the texts. I was amused by you. That is not an answer. Everlee leaned closer. You always thought I meant people who had been dead for centuries. My pulse moved against the collar of my shirt. Then who did you mean? Her eyes did not leave mine. I meant us. The lake seemed to pause between one wave and the next. No contract sat between us. No report waited for a signature. Her financial case remained unresolved, and she owed me nothing beyond the fee already recorded in the engagement. I could still step back. For once, I did not. Everlee, I said, my work for the estate ends after the injunction hearing. Until then, I will not ask you for anything that could complicate your choice. You are not asking. I am telling you. I heard you. Good. Her hand opened on the dock between us. I placed mine over it. Nothing more. It was the most honest contact I had allowed myself in weeks. The preliminary injunction hearing took place in the 6th week. Mara led the legal strategy. Julian Cross presented the financial trail. Lena testified that my authentication work had followed independent controls. I explained the difference between age, provenance, and ownership history, then linked each recovered object to invoices and shipping records. Richard's attorney argued that Everlee's father had authorized the earlier sales. Mara produced bank correspondence showing no payment entered the estate. The judge granted the preliminary injunction, suspended the default clause, and ordered preservation of Richard's company records pending trial. Outside the courtroom, Lena stopped beside me. You kept the science clean, she said. You kept the client's choice clean too. Your approval is becoming uncomfortable. Endure it. Everlee waited near the courthouse steps with Mara. She did not run into my arms. She signed the next filing, thanked Julian, and spoke to the trustees before crossing the pavement toward me. Agency looked better on her than rescue ever could. The final financial outcome took 5 more weeks. Subpoenaed bank records confirmed that Richard had routed proceeds from the unauthorized sales into his investment companies. He settled before trial, returned the remaining disputed assets, covered the estate's legal costs, and resigned from every trust position connected to the Adams family. The court converted the preliminary order into a permanent injunction as part of the settlement. Everlee's accounts reopened. Her father's name was publicly cleared. My engagement letter ended the following Friday. I packed my tools in the solarium while sunset burned across the lake. Everlee entered, carrying a manila envelope. The final invoice approval, she said. I closed the case around my loop. Mara already sent confirmation. I know. She set the envelope down. You are leaving tonight. My work is finished. Is that the only reason you stay? The answer had followed me through every corridor of the house. No. Everlee took one step closer. Then say the rest. I gripped the handle of my case. You are 38. You inherited a world where men like Richard know which doors open before they touch them. I grew up repairing display cabinets after school because my mother cleaned the museum offices. I know how to enter rooms like yours. Everlee. I assess the valuables, submit the report, and leave. She looked at the case in my hand. You think I chose you because you were useful? I think usefulness is the part of me that belongs here. Her jaw tightened. I did not ask you to belong to the house. Silence pressed against the glass walls. I meant us, she said again. Not the estate. Not the collection. Not what you can repair. The case handle cut into my palm. I set it down. I do not know how to do this without making a plan. Then make one. I want dinner with you in the city next Friday. No invoices, no trust documents, no discussion of objects older than either of us for the first 30 minutes. 20, 30, 25. Agreed. Everlee smiled, and this time I understood what it meant. She lifted her hand toward my face, then stopped. May I? Yes. Her fingers rested against my jaw. I placed one hand at her waist and drew her closer. The kiss was brief, warm, and certain. When we separated, her forehead rested against my chest for one quiet breath. Only then did she reach into her cardigan pocket. I have something else, she said. If it is a legal document, this timing is terrible. It is not binding. She handed me a proposal for a public historical gallery in the city. The estate would be sold to a preservation trust. The collection would move into a non-profit exhibition space with education programs and rotating loans. My name appeared only under a paragraph titled Potential Curatorial Leadership, subject to independent negotiation. This does not depend on dinner, she said, or on us. I made the decision to sell before tonight because my father asked me not to live inside his memory. Mara drafted the proposal. You may reject it and still see me next Friday. I read the first page. You are certain about the house? I fought to keep Richard from stealing it. That does not mean I have to spend my life guarding it. What will you keep? Everlee touched the green sea glass on the table. What shows me the way forward? I did not sign anything. I took the proposal to independent counsel the following week. 3 weeks later, after separate negotiations over governance, salary, liability, and creative control, Everlee and I signed an operating agreement as equal directors. By then, we had gone on 4 dinners. At the first, she allowed 25 minutes before asking about a 17th century love token. At the second, I repaired the loose clasp on her handbag while claiming not to be nervous. At the third, she caught me tightening a restaurant chair screw with a coin. You repair things when you do not know what to say, she said. The chair was unstable. You like me. The two facts can coexist. She laughed so loudly, the waiter smiled. 1 year after the night on the dock, city traffic moved beyond the tall gallery windows in a steady current. The sound had replaced the lake water, but not its rhythm. Cars rolled over wet pavement, brakes hissed, footsteps crossed the lobby below. 3 hours remained before the opening of the Adams Gonzalez Historical Gallery. Richard's settlement had stabilized the estate, funded employee severance for the lakeside staff, and endowed the first year of public programming. The Preservation Trust now maintained the house as a research retreat. Everlee owned the Gallery Foundation with an independent board. I served as curatorial director under the operating agreement our attorneys had negotiated. Her father's recovered collection filled the central hall. Not hidden, not sold, seen. I adjusted the environmental controls beside the bronze astrolabe. Everlee entered carrying 2 coffees. Mine was black. Hers held cream. Legal correspondence? I asked. Opening day piece. She leaned against the desk in her cream cardigan. The Metropolitan trustees arrived early. They want a private tour. They can wait 5 minutes. The display case is still stabilizing. You know they donated half the education wing. Humidity does not respect philanthropy. She smiled and placed a velvet box beside my keyboard. Inside lay the restored green sea glass on a small stand. Beneath it, the childhood note had been protected behind archival film. For Dad to show the way home. The repaired seam still caught the light. Everlee stepped beside me, close enough that her shoulder touched mine. "You could have hidden the cracks," she said. "I could have made the repair less honest." Is that curator language for sentimental? It is curator language for accurate. Below us, the first school group gathered behind the lobby doors. Their voices rose to the stairwell and mixed with the traffic outside. Everlee took my hand. The city's rhythm no longer counted down what we might lose. It carried people toward the doors we had chosen to open. She looked at the sea glass, then at me. "To show the way home," she said. I closed my fingers around hers. Beyond the office glass, the gallery lights came on one room at a time, illuminating the objects we had protected and the life we had chosen to build around them. I'm already there. The end. Closing thoughts. Core lesson. The truth can protect a legacy. But love begins when two people choose a future that belongs to them, rather than living inside someone else's expectations. Green flag. Healthy love respects agency, boundaries, and independent choices. It offers care without creating emotional debt and allows both partners to stand as equals. Please like and subscribe so we can share more stories like this.